welcome. It's Friday, and it's also This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper. I am David Cooper. It's This Is Going Well, I Think. The show where no one's listening. No one cares. The show where every episode's the last episode. Today, a fantastic lineup. In about 30 minutes' time, foreign correspondent Tony Five is going to join us to explain a hilarious date mix-up he went on with a woman. Tony thought he was going on one romantic activity with his date, but due to a misreading, mispronouncing, misunderstanding, he went on a completely other one, and the story is hilarious. After that, we'll be joined by a bat biologist, and that is not somebody whose name is Dan Riskin. It's somebody else, and she's co-authored a paper showing that endangered bats are ending up being sold in glass cases as, I don't know, keepsakes on Amazon, eBay, and Etsy. Why is this happening? What can be done? And generally, I think we'd like to get the awareness out on endangered species being sold as specimens to give as gifts and why that's a terrible idea. And don't worry, bat biologist Dan Riskin's going to be on the show too. After that, a new paper that reveals chimpanzees, a not-so-distant cousin of us, are capable of human speech. That's been revealed in resurfaced videos. We'll talk to a researcher who knows his chimp voice sound noise thingies about that story. And finally, facts you didn't know about sports and sports science by somebody who wrote a book on that. Fun things about sports that we'll discuss as we get through the Olympics. That's the show. That's some of the lineup, and we're about to dive in. But first, this.
David Cooper.
Yeah, it's Croquet was the real original there, Dan. Real f***ing original.
King of my heart.
Oh, we had a nice little time when we hung out in Canada.
We did. We went on a date. We had a really lovely time.
We had a chaperone, though. Dan Riskin, man of science, bat biologist, evolutionary biologist, science educator, science communicator, Science Appliance.
Yes.
The name of our time together. Okay, now people know what this is.
Yeah, good. It's good to label it. That's what the higher-ups want you to do.
The higher Sir Edmund Podcast, the higher up of podcasting.
The Duke of Pod. So you were in town, and I said, let's hang out. And not only that, let's hang out in a format that it works with your brand. And so we went and saw some stand-up comedy.
We did. We definitely did. We hung out with a friend of mine who's insane. She's on the show regularly, too. Natalie Norman, comedian.
Very funny.
You guys are so different. It could have gone terribly, but it went okay. It went well.
It went well. And not only that, while we were sitting together on this back balcony of a restaurant in Toronto, close to the comedy club where I had seen her perform, we had a common nighthawk flying overhead, making little common nighthawk noises like, and like I was just losing my mind. It was amazing.
There I am with my friend who, I don't mean to slut shame or anything, but she's like sexually promiscuous. She's a party person. She's got lots of friends. She's not a nerd. And there you are beside me. You're like, that's a common nighthawk. You pull out your birding app, which I said a great joke in the moment. I said it's a dating app for virgins. And I'm like, two personalities could not be further apart, but it worked. The three of us had a nice time.
Yeah, I think the key is you just ask lots of questions and you listen to the answers and you learn things. And I thought the conversation was very interesting. I got a lot out of it. I found it really interesting to learn how you make a living doing that, like how you measure success, how you deal with rooms that are going well or if it's going poorly, and then just like personal stuff like, flooding Toronto and stuff where people have common ground. And I don't know, it's fun to talk to somebody who's like a total break from the normal nerdy sort of world I live in.
I won't say this about Natalie while she's here because I don't know, I'm a bad person, but I'm very proud of her for making a living doing stand-up comedy because I used to be a comic, and that is hard. Like that is... To just make like a break-even living so that you don't have to wait tables to support your comedy habit is very impressive in the comedy world. So I don't know, I look up to her. I guess I would never tell her that though. Yeah,
and it sounds like she has a special that she's working on that's going to come out, and like she's doing a lot of stuff. But the thing that impresses me, and this was true for her set at the Comedy Place, but also for other sets, is like you can't. You're out there, like you're emotionally invested in what you're doing, right? Like you can't completely dissociate from it. People are by the nature of it, just judging you as you do your thing. And so like it would be emotionally exhausting to have that as a career. Not only it'd be hard to be working at McDonald's and trying to make ends meet, but to be a comedian making ends meet, hopefully you're making more money than you do at McDonald's, but you also your work is more emotionally taxing.
It ain't like a Chris Rock special stand-up. Like people are like, oh, I'm going to see stand-up comedy. It'll be like Chris Rock. It'll be like, Amy Schumer. It'll be like it'll be great when you go to local comedy. And it's like, no, this is not great every night. This is a grind. This is trying to grow your craft every day and getting the motivation to do it every day. It is horrible. And we saw a not great gig. Like there was not a great night for any of the comedians.
There was this weird heckler guy who was just creepy, and the whole room morphed to his weird energy. He was a little bit of a, I don't know. He gave me the creeps.
Yeah, he was a bit slimy, that guy.
He was slimy, and he was kept answering, somebody make a joke, and then he'd retort, and it was just
and because the room was no good, the audience wasn't really laughing. It was a weird night. It was an off night for the comics. They kind of had to address him because it's well, what do you do? I'm having a bad night anyway. I guess I'll interact with this weirdo. That's the trade-off. If you're having a great night and it's a great room, there's kind of a shut up projected from the stage to the heckler. That person can be removed if they're no good. But if it's a terrible night and an off night and you get a weird heckler, it's well, I may as well interact with them. It's practice.
May as well just make some lemonade out of this. Yeah, I got that.
But it truly was a day because we hung out and then I drove you home. And then we played music for each other. And then you played
we listened to each other's music on the drive. We took turns oh, how about this song? Have you ever heard this? And then
you played a song for me. It's Laura Huron with Allison
something.
Pontier?
Yeah, Pontier or something like that. Yeah.
It's called I Lied, and I love it. It's a great track, and I played it for my girlfriend, and we were sharing music, and I'm liking your music, and it was a real romantic date. Don't tell your wife.
Yeah, we had a good time, and your rented car that had never been driven before, so it felt like you were a very fancy guy.
Dude, it was a Nissan Sentra? Is that a thing?
Oh, God, I'm not a car guy. It could have been a truck for all I knew, but it was very new.
Small sedan class Nissan. I rented a car at Toronto Airport. I returned it at Toronto Island Airport. And I did that a month ago, and it had 15 clicks on it. And then I did it again, and it's another car. It had 11 clicks on it. I'm just driving these new cars, but I'm also shuttling them from Pearson Airport to the Island Airport. They're not charging me for it. I think when you go to rent a car, the system's well, if this location has less cars than that location, and that location, then we won't charge anything.
So you don't pay a fee to drop off at a different place?
Well, I think at a certain point you do. If one airport found itself with 1 billion cars and the other one was low on cars, they'd charge you $500.
But you're paying more because you rented the airport anyway. You're paying a fee for that.
Well, don't tell my former employer, but I never got kicked off of my, company that sends. I shouldn't be disclosing it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So do you just put in the code and then you use that when
I pay for it. I'm not billing it to the company, but they
I don't think that's unethical.
They have because it was a company that had offices around the world. There was an office in Shanghai, an office in Mendoza. There was an office in Sheffield, England. There was an office in Tel Aviv. It's one of these international companies. So they get, and they negotiate a rate with the rent. So I get a corporate rate, and so it's not too bad. I shouldn't do it. It's unethical.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I pull, I used to work for a certain cell phone company that owns Bell Media. Wait, it is Bell Media. I worked for Bell Media.
Well, no, it's just drop the media. It's Bell.
Oops. Yeah, I worked for a cell phone company that owns Bell Media. And no, I didn't work for the cell phone company. Anyway, the point is there are corporate discounts, but honestly, they're not that good. I put them in and then I'm well, that didn't change the price.
This one is good. It's maybe 40% off.
Whoa.
Yeah.
On a car rental. That's good.
On a car rental. I feel weird every time I use it. I guess it's not that bad. I'm paying for it. Maybe.
You're paying for it. I don't. It's hard to. Is that unethical? I don't think it is. Next time we go on a date, we'll have to, instead of a stand-up comedian, we'll have to get an ethicist.
Is it illegal? I guess it's breach of contract. I guess I can't be arrested. Is it fraud? Maybe. I don't know. What would you?
Yeah, it
might
it
be
cancelable?
Fraud.
Is it? It's not like a Free the Penguins charity that you used to work for and you're taking money out of their back pocket by continuing to use this. It was just a for-profit company and you're just continuing to finagle.
How about
I think
this?
It's fine.
Everything I just disclosed was for parody purposes. I'm a performer. It is not true. I would never commit fraud. I was talking about how a friend left mushroom chocolates in my fridge the other day.
Oh.
Like psilocybin chocolates. And I'm like, well, that's parody. That never actually happened. I would never,
Right.
you know, you could just buy them at the bodegas here. I went into a bodega and I asked the guy, hey, do you have mushroom chocolates? He's like, yeah. And he pulls out a box and it's like all these, like, they look like regular candy bars too.
Oh, man.
And they're not legal. I didn't buy one, but I'm like, what if I was just a cop and I was like, hey, you had mushroom chocolates? You'd get shut down like that.
Right. You know, that is more illegal than using the code to rent a car.
Yeah, I would say one is like the mildest form of fraud in the world that hurts nobody, and the other is controlled substances. So yeah, they're different tiers of one's like a criminal offense. I guess fraud. Usually you just get sued for fraud, right?
I don't know. No, I don't know. I've never been caught.
Anyway, this is all parody. None of this happened.
None.
It was a great time we spent together. We talked about the common nighthawk.
Yes.
Tell me about the common nighthawk.
Wow, it's a bird that eats insects up in the air, but they come out at night and they have these bars on the wings, and you just don't see them very often or hear them, and it's just a real treat when you see them. But I want to go back to the stand-up comedy thing, because there was a joke so there was a guy with a mullet who was between acts. I guess he was hosting. Is that how it works?
The host. So he would have done 10 minutes at the top. The host usually starts the show, but we showed up a little late.
We missed that because you were late.
Yeah, I was.
You held us up.
I did.
Because you were, so busy at your father's birthday dinner, which you left early to go on the date with me.
But you met my brother-in-law, my brother's husband, who was a huge fan. And I came up with a great joke. I'm like, do you want an autograph? And he was like, no. I'm like, Dan, no. Do you want an autograph from my brother's husband so you can show your wife someone's your fan?
Yeah, that was good. Yeah. That was a funny joke. I like that. Yeah, you had a couple of good ringers. You're good in the field. You should do your show from the field. You should just make a live show where you walk around with a microphone and that's what you do.
I feel like you and I used to do interesting science segments, and now we just talk about ourselves. When we come back with Dan Riskin, we'll continue our conversation about stand-up comedy, local stand-up comedy, and then we're going to talk about which kind of paper is the deadliest. Which kind of paper could give you the worst cut? Dan Riskin's here, Bat Biologist. It's the Science Appliance. And we are back with Daniel K. Riskin, a doctorate of science stuff.
Zoology.
Oh, so you studied at a zoo?
No, zoology means the study of animals, just like botany is a study of plants.
I know that.
So if you study any animal, you're a zoologist. You don't have to work at a zoo. I mean, a zoo has animals. That's why it's called a zoo. But
there is a study of like zookeeping. Is it just called zookeeping studies, or is there a special word?
Well, I think it's husbandry or animal husbandry or something like that might be more. I mean, a lot of people with zoology degrees end up working in zoos, but like if you are a bat biologist, you are in the Department of Zoology. If they have it.
Okay, you and I hung out in Canada. I was visiting my father's birthday. We went to a local stand-up gig with a friend of mine, Natalie Norman, great Toronto-based comedian, was in. We hung out with her, but we were talking about the grind of stand-up as just an entry-level performer or a mid-level performer when you're not the greats. You're not like the Larry David. You're not the Eddie Murphy. You're not the...
Well, you're the early Larry David, right? That's the hope, is that all of them are on their way. They're on this trajectory, and this is going to be their origin story.
Yeah, but every busker like Union Square in New York, or I guess Washington Square Park in New York, is hoping to become, Bon Jovi. Right. It's a long tail? Is that what they call it?
Yeah. Heavy-tailed distribution, for sure, where just a couple people make it, but almost nobody else does. Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing. You go see a show, and I mean, admit it. Like every time you see a nobody performer, and that's not what I'm saying about your friend at all. I'm just saying, like every time you go to a show and you don't know the person or whatever, you're hoping that you someday go back and say, "Oh, I saw them before they were big." Like that's the goal, right? I mean, that at least crosses your mind, doesn't it?
Sure. I've seen a lot of comedy, so I think I've seen like maybe 1,000 of those shows. So not anymore for me, but yes. And when I go see a local band that I really like, yes, of course, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, the guy who with the mullet, who was the host, who would have done a 10-minute set at the beginning that we missed, and then he came out between the sets that we saw and sort of like linked them. He had a couple of like ready to go jokes that he told, and one of them was comparing. He talked about how Tetris versus Jenga are metaphors for two different visions of society. That Tetris comes from Russia, and it's like everyone is in, orderly and fits into their place, but you can never rise up because as soon as you do your job properly, you just disappear. And that was his view of Tetris. But Jenga is like capitalism, where you take from the bottom and you put it on top, and the whole thing builds up really high, and eventually the whole thing collapses. That was his joke, and it was very funny. And I was thinking about it like later, and I thought of like a thing that he should add to the joke.
It's called a tag, a follow-up. Like you get your first laugh, and then you add a little bit onto it. The slang for that is a tag, or the jargon for that is a tag.
Okay, I thought of a tag.
Should we deliver him this tag? Like I don't know
how to give it to him.
I can get it to him through my friend Natalie.
Okay, so here's can I tell you the tag, or is that like not done among comedians?
Of course it's done. I've written tags for my friend. I had a friend who was really old, and she was talking about dating old guys, and she's like, I'm 70, and the guys, I'm dating wear diapers, and that was her punchline. Or like, I'm going to have to change his diapers. And I'm like, hey, friend, you should add to the end of that joke, I'm going to have to change his diapers. It depends. And she now uses that interact. It's a totally done thing.
Yes. Okay. All right. So here's my tag is he should say, but of course in Jenga, then it all collapses. So everyone's down on the floor. But of course, then the government comes in and builds it back up and puts the same ones back up on top again so that it can repeat itself. And so I just thought there would be like the government intervention of bailing out the rich people and putting them back on top of the structure. I thought that would be a nice little, I didn't write it as a joke.
I see.
But I think it like as part of the story, it works is the rebuilding a government intervention to help the rich people stay rich.
So we in the biz, we would call what you just did a premise for a tag. So it's not a joke. It's not structured like a joke. There's no setup. There's no punch. There's no addendum to an existing punch. But it's an idea. It's a premise. That's what we call like the thought behind a joke.
I've got a thought behind a joke. Give him that. Find a way to get that to Mullet Guy.
It's a good premise. Yeah.
You don't love it.
No, I do.
You don't want to put your name on it. You don't want to be like, here's one from David Cooper.
No.
But you can say my nerd, not funny friend who just really got obsessed with this whole metaphor.
No, I'm saying it's a good premise. I just you want me to laugh? It's not a joke. You haven't written a joke, Dan.
No, I don't want a mercy. I don't need your mercy.
It's not a mercy. I'm telling you, I like it, but it's not a joke yet. It's a good premise. That's all it is.
All right, maybe next time we talk, it'll be a joke. I'll work on it.
I once saw a show like that, and the host delivered a joke, and no one laughed, and I thought it was the best premise in the world. And it was simply that if time travel exists, never go back to try to kill Hitler, because Hitler's probably a genius at killing time travelers. Because that's what everyone says they're going to do, right? The first thing, if you're a good person and time travel exists, first thing I'm going to do, kill Hitler. Because Hitler, as I've read, is not a great guy. This is not a guy you want at your bar mitzvah.
Here we go again, talking about Hitler. Yes, but I get the idea. It is a good premise because if time travel does exist, then Hitler did survive multiple attempts on his life. So he must be good at killing time travel.
No offense, as a Jew, I'm just saying probably a greater number of Jewish time travelers like myself would probably want to go kill Hitler because he was not the kindest person to the Jews. You might say Hitler didn't care for Jews. Not his thing. So, but maybe that's the reason he hates us, because we keep going back in time to try to kill him.
Was that the premise? Because that's funny.
No, but I've been thinking, I don't know who this guy was.
Funny, there's your joke. That's funny.
And I was at a comedy club in Sweden where I just did a set because I was traveling, and I'll never find out who this guy is, but I want to give him this one. And it's been bugging me for like 10 years. This show was like in 2014.
The tag is maybe that's why he hates Jews?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But the guy himself wasn't Jewish, so I'm like, well, maybe it wouldn't work because it would come off a little anti-Semitic.
No, I think if you're in Sweden, that would land. I feel like it's okay to make that joke.
Well, he was an American guy. It was called like the American stand-up night in Stockholm. It's just like all English stand-up. It wasn't Swedish stand-up. Not important. Dan Riskin, I hate that I'm about to introduce a science topic, and your tone's just going to change. It always changes. You pull up your nose.
The same tone. Watch me keep the same tone. I'll just keep it completely a tone of, what is my tone right now?
I don't know. Jovial.
Okay. Jovial tone. Okay,
and it's going to switch into overly scientific.
Well, listen, we're talking about Hitler and we're still jovial. So if I can't keep jovial for my science, because my science makes me less jovial than Hitler.
I'm saying Hitler was not a great guy. I'm not doing anything wrong right now.
I guess that's the jovial. We can agree on that, I guess, is the common ground. It's
really easy to agree on that one with most people. And the people who won't agree to that one, it's a great indicator like, hey, that's not a guy I want to hang out with,
It's a bit of a red flag. I would call that a red flag.
Maybe even a bright red flag.
Yeah.
A crimson flag.
A crimson flag.
Okay. We all love paper cuts. They're not annoying at all. Don't you love when you get them between two fingers? Like, what do you call that? The webbing? It's not webbing, but if you were like a duck, it's where your webbing would be between your fingers.
Does that part of the body have a name? I don't know if that, I mean, maybe it does. I'm not.
It's called the scinis joinius fingeris maximus in Latin.
Yeah, like this nasal septum is the name for the place between your two nostrils. Septum is a good word, but it's not a septum between your fingers.
You just wanted to show off that you knew the word septum.
No, but like there are words that are great, or like the gap between two teeth is a diastema. That's a great word.
Whoa, that is a great word.
But it is a great word. And like cattle have like a space in their mouth where there's no teeth and they can roll the cut around. And so there's like molars behind it and there's other teeth in front of it. And there's just this gap and it's the diastema. And when like Lauren Bacall or whoever that famous actress was that had the nice gap between her two front teeth, that's called like dentists call that a diastema. But that's not between your fingers. I don't know what that's called. That's a good, okay, go on.
Well, it's just a great word. That's all. I mean, I know other great words. My favorite sciencey word is teledildonics. Do you know that word?
Yes, I think I know exactly what that is based on the word.
I am not going to be gross, but adults, have toys for the bedroom, okay? And a lot of them are quote-unquote dumb, like they just plug in the wall, they just have a battery, whatever.
You mean the toy is dumb, not
it's a simple on-off.
You're not judging the people who have these toys and calling them dumb.
No, they're not dumb at all. It's a wise thing to do. It's an investment in your enjoyment. I'm not going to go in the gutter here, I promise.
I can see that you are doing a great... I'm feeling jovial still because you have not gone in the gutter.
Teledildonics is the class of adult toys that are quote-unquote smart. So maybe, your partner's out and they got a pair of underwear that has an attachment and it's Bluetooth connected to the phone. And then you're in another part of the world and you can control it. Or maybe there's something where, 3D headsets where you're both engaging in erotic activity, but over the internet. It's the class of devices that are smart sex toys are called teledildonics, like the field. Isn't that an amazing word?
It's a great word. It's a great word.
Dildonics.
Dildonics.
Did I go too far in the gutter? Was that too far?
No, I think we were good. I think you kept it. You did say underwear, but I think that's fine.
Paper cuts.
As far as paper cuts. Now, this is not related to teledildonics, or could be, but there is a study out of Denmark.
There is. And we're going to get to this Danish study about paper cuts on the Science Appliance. We're going to go through one legitimate science story here with Daniel K. Riskin, biologist of bats.
Jovial biologist of bats.
Generally jovial. What is that called? See. Like false alliteration, where it sounds the same, but the letters are different? There's a word for this.
I think it's called a diastema.
Because generally is G and jovial is J, but it sounds the same. The J. Dan Riskin's here. We'll be back with more of him. And we're back. It's the Science Appliance with Daniel Riskin. No messing around this time. Paper cuts.
Paper cuts.
Some paper appears to me less cutty than other papers. For example, tissue paper. Is it really paper? Let's, for the purpose of this argument, say yes. You ain't getting a cut from Kleenex. But construction paper, which isn't really used for construction, it's mostly just for murals and stuff.
It is in my house. I have kids, and they build things out of everything. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, so this research out of Denmark, I like what they did because there's sort of two pieces to the puzzle. One is the thickness of the paper, and the other one is the cutting angle. So
tone changed.
What's that?
Tone changed.
My tone changed?
Tone changed. Tone changed?
Well, okay. So there's this group.
No, we got to get on track. We got to get on track. No distractions.
All right. So they made some material that mimics human skin, and they just tried to cut it with a bunch of paper and made some measurements. Then they made a computer model, and eventually they made a paper machete. Like paper mache, but it's a paper machete. Like they made a machete out of paper that can cut people. So here's what they did. First, they looked at a whole bunch of thicknesses of paper to see what happens on the microscopic level when it tries to cut human skin. And what they found is if it's too soft or if it's too thin, it's like tissue, then it doesn't have the strength it buckles. It scrunches up when you try to cut your skin with it. And then if it's really thick, it pushes on the skin, but it doesn't cut it because it's too thick and it doesn't concentrate the pressure on a small enough space. So it's kind of like cutting yourself with a spoon. Like you just can't do it, right? So too thin, too thick. In the middle, at about 65 micrometers, which is 0.065 millimeters, which is about a 15th of a millimeter, that is the sweet spot. That is the paper that cuts best. and that is the thickness of some magazines, but most notably dot matrix printer paper.
Ooh.
That is the best paper to try to kill someone with. But I said there are two pieces of it. One is the thickness and one is the angle. And the angle is where it gets much more interesting. You can deliver a paper cut with those other kinds of paper if the angle is exactly perpendicular to the surface of the skin. So if it comes in at exactly 0 degrees and you slide it along the skin, you can cut with tissue paper. It's not easy. If the angle is perfect, you can do it. And if it's too thick, but you do exactly the right angle, you can do it. The thing that makes those papers in the middle size so dangerous, like dot matrix printer paper, is that they have much more leeway in terms of what angle they can cut at. So they can be 15 degrees off axis and they will still be able to cut the skin. And so that's the magic sauce. And that's why those papers, like certain magazines or whatever, can cut you so easily, is because when you scrunch up a piece of paper, your hand comes into contact with the paper edge, but it's never at exactly 0 degrees, so you don't get cut. But it might be within 15 degrees of 0 degrees. And so certain papers will cut you in those circumstances. And that's why you get paper cuts from certain kinds of paper.
I'm just thinking about how bad a paper cut can be from this optimally dangerous paper. Like, what's the world's worst paper cut? Could you lose a whole finger? Could you slice your neck in some sort of violent, like, is paper a weapon?
I looked to see if there was anything on The Office that addressed this. And one time Meredith gets a paper cut on her neck when somebody throws a Valentine at her. That's about the most paper cut content. I thought there'd be a whole Dwight Schrute trying to kill people with paper episode, but there was not.
Okay, well, I'm curious what the world's worst paper cut is, but a quick Googling, I found nothing. In fact, I found a link to this very study that you sent out. I think the world's very excited about it. Paper cuts are hot right
as
now.
well they should be. And it was nice. I read because the press release has a link to the paper, but then as what happens often is the new paper is out, but all that's at the journal website is the abstract, and it's been accepted, but they don't have the actual paper there. So then you got to email the researchers, and then you got to think, congratulations on your study. Can I have your paper? And then they send you the paper. But they also had like a YouTube video they'd made to explain how the paper cuts worked and all this stuff. And they'd put some work into the explanation of it. I enjoyed it very much, but making a machete out of paper, that was a nice touch. That was even part of the paper. It's crazy.
Cool. Well, earlier we were talking about joke premises not quite turning into jokes. I'm taking a tangent right now. When I was doing stand-up, I had this joke I could never make work. And my premise was I find banana skins gross, but not bananas. And I would like joke about how disgusting banana peels were. And then when people are like, what is he talking about? I'm like, take a human being. I'll shake your hand. You're fine. Like, I'll touch you if but I would touch your skin, no problem. But if a pile of your skin was sitting on the floor, that would be the most disgusting thing in the world. And I would try to draw this parallel about how skin not on a person is gross. A peel on a banana, not on a banana, is equally as gross. I could never turn it into a joke, I guess, because it makes no sense. But now that you're talking about scientists simulating skin, it got me thinking like, okay, well, a pile of skin without a human is like one of the grossest things in the world.
That is a gross idea. Yeah, I think that's what made Silence of the Lambs so
it's like so memorable, but all it is you just subtract a human, like even a limb. Human parts in and of themselves, except for maybe nail clippings, which are pretty gross.
I will tell you something. So when I was doing my PhD, I was interested in a bunch of things about bats, but my supervisor was interested in muscle. And so because he was interested in muscle and he'd worked on muscles in bats, he was also working on a bunch of other studies in horses, in dogs, and in humans, where he would dissect out different muscle tissues and then he would stain them with these different chemicals to look at what muscle.
Cadavers? Like he was working with bodies?
Yeah.
Wild.
So one day, a human hand arrives at the lab, this arm, cut off like kind of mid sort of forearm.
That's when I would say I'm packing it up and this career's not for me.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I could do this, right? I've like dissected a ton of animals. Like I know what I'm doing, but no problem, right? And you know that it's going to be a hand. So you're like, okay. But I will tell you that when you open that up and you get in there and it's this old lady's hand with nails and you're just like, that looks like a person's hand. It is a person's hand. It puts you back because like the hand is a really Like that's a thing you interact with on people, right?
It's an
like
intimate thing. If you're a laborer, you might have calluses. If the hands tell you so much about a person.
But also when you meet a person, you shake their hand.
Yeah.
You know, like looking at somebody's hands isn't considered socially weird. Like you wouldn't look at a person's middle of their back as much, or if you did, you'd be subtle about it. But like hands, you know what hands look like. Like, and we hold hands of people we care about, and anyway, hands. So the nails are especially long, and I'm like thinking, like, did those nails keep growing after they died? Is that really a thing? And then he's like just getting the thing out there, and then he takes out the scalpel and starts going into the muscle that he wants to take out from the thumb. And I'm like, I'm leaving.
Yeah, it's done.
I can't do it. I gotta go. See ya. And I was like, I'm not helping you anymore. I have to leave. And I just walked out. And he was good about it. He's like the nicest guy in the world. He was totally understanding and validating and said, yeah, a lot of people like they're fine with a dissection until you get to the face or the hands. Those are the things that a lot of people have a hard time with. But woof, I'll tell you.
That's a lot. Body parts not on a body. Even like nail clippings are gross. Like a hair. Like if I would, not that I want to touch your hair, but I like would, I guess. But if I was eating a meal and just one of your hairs was in my meal, disgusting. You got to stop.
Yeah.
A tooth. If you just saw like a tooth on the street, disgusting.
Yeah. I don't think I'm as grossed out by it as you. I'm pretty grossed out. But I'm not like
something about skin, like somehow removing your skin. If you could even,
but
do
internal organ is worse. Like that's external organ. Like it is, if it was like, oh, a piece of my spleen is in your salad, like you wouldn't want that.
We did one science story.
We did one.
We could do another.
It's just we're on the downhill trajectory. Like if you made a graph of all our conversations, like how many science stories we get through per.
It used to be 5 or 6
segment.
in 20 minutes. Oh my God. Okay, let's talk about this. Falling for flattery makes you seem like less of a great worker. So don't just like be a sucker for flattery. I guess in the workplace, is that what this study reveals?
Yeah, they did it in the workplace. They also did it in a classroom. So, and the classroom one is like a really easy one for me to get my head around. So what they did is they had students go in and they thought they were doing a project where they were going to debate this other group of students. And there was a TA or a teacher who was going to, decide who won the debate. And they were preparing. And you come into the class and you're getting ready. And then you see the other team sucking up very clearly, like flattering the teacher and saying really nice things. And then right before the debate, they asked the teacher for a favor. And it's not clear what it was. Like maybe it was to have like an extension of 5 minutes, or maybe it was to have something, but they were like, oh, your ideas are so great. Can we just have like 5 minutes? So they sucked up to them and then asked for a favor. Now, in this experiment, half the groups, the teacher did not grant the favor. And in the experiment, half the groups, the teacher did grant the favor. And they wanted to know the difference in how the teacher was perceived by people, depending on whether they granted a favor to the suck-ups or denied the favor to the suck-ups. And what they found is, the researchers, is that if you see a teacher who's being sucked up to, and they do grant a favor to the person that sucked up to them, they seem more naive and they seem less competent as a teacher. And that is true for the teacher scenario, but it's also true for a whole bunch of business scenarios where if you have a boss and they're getting brown-nosed and then they do something for the person that's brown-nosing, you think of your boss as a bit of an idiot. Like, can't they clearly see that that person was brown-nosing just to get that favor? And I'm put off by the whole thing, and I don't think you're as competent a boss as I would if you had denied it. So if you're a boss or a teacher or in any position of power, and you think it's harmless to just grant things to the people that are sucking up to you, just be wary of the fact that you are projecting an image to everybody else you work with that you're a bit of an idiot.
This is the science behind me thinking less of people who are nice to me.
There you go. So in this scenario, it wasn't the person who was receiving the kindness that was doing the suck up. It was you seeing the person granting a kindness to somebody else.
Yeah, so when people are nice to me, I think less of them. No, I'm kidding. Daniel Riskin, science communicator. Look him up at danielriskin.sciencecommunicator.co.uk.
And then when you don't get a hit, let's see what, actually, I'm going to look that up. I just want to see what happened.
Nothing. It should just be like
Riskin,
it could not connect error.
Communicator. And then I'll just go .co.uk.
Why the co.uk? What is this with these British people? Why co? Why can't they just do .uk? What's going on over there? I gotta know.
There you go. Look, I got something on LinkedIn for top science and tech stories from Dan Riskin. What is that even a LinkedIn thing? What is that?
What?
Oh, it's just I see. It's just a segment it's a CP24 segment, but it's labeled as such. So it makes it sound like you found a website where it's got all my science and tech stories, but it's not. Hey, I got a question for you. Do we have time? Are we done?
We're done, but we got a minute. Why?
Okay, here's a quick question. What If you were going to write, say, a newsletter and you were going to write about this sucking up thing, what image would you use to go with it? What's a good image to go with the story that I just told about the brown nosing? Not too graphic.
Is there like a famous movie with like with a brown nose? Oh, maybe The Simpsons. What's the nerdy kid in The Simpsons? Lisa Simpson.
No. Well, what about the guys like, Mr. Burns, sir? You do look like that's Smithers. Smithers. Yeah, Smithers. I'll just have a picture of Smithers.
Yeah, there you go. You're welcome.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. The Science Appliance concludes. Have you ever planned a romantic date and then things went sideways because you misunderstood a word, you misread a word? That's what happened to Tony. And you are going to love the story that our foreign correspondent, Tony 5, is going to tell you in just a moment. So stick around for it. We are back with foreign correspondent Tony 5, who is trying to improve himself. He's trying to become a jack of all trades, a master of none, a polymath, if you will. Right now, he's a non-math. You don't have any maths. Tony, welcome to the show.
David, always a pleasure. I have that Friday feeling, David. Is it Friday today?
I think it is Friday, Augustus the 2nd.
Yes, then I have that feeling, David. No, it's been a week, David. I'll say that much. And in terms of life, it's good.
What possessed you to attempt to gain a new skill? Are you just trying to get out there and meet new people? Like what's going on with you? We'll get to the skill in a second. What's your motivation here for you to acquire new skills?
So let me tell you a very fantastical story. I was seeing a lovely girl and I took her out. We do lots of things. And
is that sex? Is that code for sex? Lots of things?
Correct. Yeah. Different holes, different goals, David, as I like to say.
I hate you.
So I said to her, I love learning new things. And, I've always been into sports and different things like that. And we chatted away. Right now, I don't know whether you heard of croquet. Have you heard of croquet?
Crochet. That's when you knit. No, I know. But it's like a British thing where you hit a ball in a lawn or
Correct,
something like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, you alluded to it, but it actually happened. So I said to this girl, let's do a course, just go and play the thing.
A course? Like take a lesson?
Well, they do an introduction, a lesson. So anybody who's even listening halfway to this show knows what happened. I met her. She took me to essentially an old people's home, and I learned how to crochet for an hour and a half. 90 minutes of my life, I sat there with a crochet needle trying to crochet.
So you told her, let's take a crochet class. Sorry,
crochet lesson.
Yes.
Croquet. Let's see. This is exactly how it happened, David. Now you understand what happened. I said, I've been crap at this. Is the conversation. Hi, we've just had sex. We've done whatever. I said, I really wanted to play golf. A lot of the decisions in my industry were made on the golf course. And I said, I've never been able to play golf. It frustrates the hell out of me. And we were watching the Olympics and I said, I like sports, but she goes, what sports have you ever been in? I said, not very good at golf. I've always wanted to play golf. I reckon I'd be better at croquet. It's the whole Bridgerton thing, Downton Abbey sort of rubbish. They go on these lawns, you whack them. It's called the mallet. You hit the mallet with his little balls.
But you didn't say any of that. You just said, I want to do crochet.
No, I said, that's what I said to her.
I see. So she thought she was booking the correct thing.
Right. And of all the things, David, that I mock on this show, right? What's the one thing I mock where I get all of my knowledge from, David?
Groupon.
She got me a Groupon for crochet, David. For crochet. So it's the half term here. It was full summer term, summer vacation. I am in a sweat box yesterday morning, 34 degrees, in a room with one grandma, a grandchild, learning how to crochet balls, little balls. This girl who is totally embarrassed, and I can't say anything because she's paid £24. What's that, $35?
And with the Groupon discount, it's probably no refunds either.
Not a chance, because we've already redeemed the voucher. So she said in the morning, she said, I'm really sorry. She said, you're going to think this is a joke, but I really got this wrong. And I said, I'm, laughing along. She knows my sense of humor. We're going to go somewhere fun. And I sat there for 90 minutes of my life, David, learning a drop knot, a top stitch, a double stitch, a third stitch and I've got I'm going to keep it. and I'm going to send it to you. This is going to be your present for my Thanksgiving. You're going to forget about it from now till November, guaranteed, dear listener. David will forget about it. David will not remember it. And on Thanksgiving Day, I'm going to open it. He's going to get it in a packet, and he will lose his mind.
I will. I have so many questions. Can we just rewind a bit? You're kind of going to the end of the story.
Sorry, go for it. I'm so excited. I didn't realize Crochet would bring this out of me, David.
First of all, I actually would argue this is a better date, because if you learned croquet, if you took a 90-minute lesson whacking balls on a lawn, sure, it's a nice date. But in the grand scheme of your life, you're not going to remember that. You know, that's kind of boring. But now's the time where you thought you were going to crochet and you went to croquet, or did I get it backwards again?
No, other way round, dude. This is why we'll end up going to the... See, now you completely understand what I'm saying. You keep getting it. This is my problem, and I speak English. Like, you speak American. It's very different. I don't understand you half the time. I kept swapping it round. So somewhere in this poor girl's mind, and I can't blame her, because I must have said crochet at some stage so many times. So she's gone on Groupon, booked it, thinking this is great, not really looking at the graphics, which has got a needle and an old woman in it, for God's sake. And essentially I went on a 90-minute crochet course, which is the needle and the stitching and that sort of thing.
CH instead of QU. CH instead of
Correct.
QU.
And I've learned, David, it's not knitting.
No.
It's not cross-stitch.
No.
It's a separate art, David. Crochet is a separate art, my friend.
What was the class like? So it was not very many people. Was a granny teaching it?
David, there wasn't a massive queue. It wasn't like the Taylor Swift concert, I'll be honest with you. What on earth are you talking about, you lunatic? No, there was 4 people there. I think that's the most she's ever had. So she couldn't believe it. And when I rocked up, black guy sunglasses, early morning, she's thinking, my God, this is going to work. This is a whole new audience. And she said, are you here for the course? And I didn't know what to say. And I went, yeah, sadly, yes. And the gangster rap. And she sort of looked at me. This must be 60-something years old. She's doing some part-time work in the store, just teaching in the vacation time. You know, like kids want to come in. I mean, next to me was a group of kids learning how to make slime, David. Slime! David, this is what I did on a Thursday afternoon.
Your peer, the woman you went with, a white woman?
Yes, David!
I know, you only date white women.
Come on. Well, who else is going to take me to a crochet course? Well, who's taking me to a croquet course? Who's taking me to anything?
So it was like a really white old folks home, and this woman, was she like scared of you? I mean, what was there racism going on? What was going on?
I think at the beginning she was not in a bad way. I think she was a little bit apprehensive because, like, come on. But then she realized that obviously this idiot had bought a Groupon, and so I was registered, and she knew my name. She said, "Oh, you," and I had to tick my name off because it had been registered, because it all goes via Groupon. Shout out to Groupon out there, not really stating the obvious about whether it's croquet or crochet, but whatever.
My dream for us is someday we get big enough that you personally get to be a brand rep for Groupon.
Yeah, or croquet. And do you know what? As I was driving home, and as I've just spoken this, I mean, this topic just literally came up a minute ago. It could have been like potato croquettes. That's another thing I get confused between croquettes, crochet, and croquet.
Or it could have been like an American history course where you were learning about Davy Crockett.
See?
There's a problem here. There's a real linguistic problem here, and nobody's talking about it. We're the only ones to, what's the word I'm looking for? We're the only ones to blow the lid on this one. There are too many words that sound the same that sort of seem like croquet or croquet or croquet. It's too much.
Croquet. It's too, and I don't know whether you know the email to Antifa. I don't know what even they do, but maybe email them and get them to protest about it.
We should get Antifa and the alt-right to riot together to unite on this cause of this word, because it's causing problems. It's causing mayhem. A woman who taught a crochet class in England had to deal with a black man coming in. I mean, think of the outrage.
David, if we could get Queen Latifah to come in with Antifa, I mean, that would be it. That would be amazing. All of them together. Let's do it.
Let's rally the troops in the name of all that's crotchet. I don't know. Oh, crotchety? You know, that's another word.
Again?
Yeah.
He's Bob Cratchit. Isn't he from Tiny Tim or Scrooge? Scrooge. He's from A Christmas Miracle. Scrooge.
Could be, you know, crochet, croquet, croquette. What, croquettes? Is that a thing? Croquettes?
Croquettes. Croquettes are those little potatoes, mashed potatoes surrounded in breadcrumbs. Croquettes are lovely.
Those are pretty tasty, yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, God, I'm really quite hungry now.
So was it fun or was it just incredibly boring?
Do you know, again, I'm going to be genuinely and perfectly honest with you. I love learning new skills, right? So as much as I found it hilariously funny and whatever, I did actually enjoy it. And the woman was really diligent and she spent time. I couldn't do it. I mean, it's not difficult. You create a knot and then you go in and you go under with this crochet needle, as it were, and you're pulling knots. And it is, do you know, it is quite fun. It is quite relaxing. And I did find it interesting and fascinating and fun.
Well, you love weird interactions with strangers. You love new experiences. I feel like this was perfect for you.
I do, but I wouldn't say I love croquet, David. Crochet! See? It always happens! I don't understand what is wrong with my words.
Nobody's talking about this in the media. These are the topics that the media refuses to cover that we will. This is why you need to listen to this show. We're blowing the lid on why that word, crochet, croquet, crochet, why that word all sounds the same and why nobody's talking about it.
I believe this is why Biden stepped down, David.
This could very well be the reason. We'll be back with more Tony 5 blowing the lid on the crochet croquet conspiracy. We are back with foreign correspondent reporting on the important news of the day. We are blowing the lid of the crochet croquet conspiracy. Think old ladies with their knitting and weird, I guess also old dudes on a lawn hitting around balls for really no good reason. Why are these two things named the same? Nobody's ever asked that important question, but we're getting to the bottom of it here with Tony 5, foreign correspondent. Tony, welcome to the show.
David, I want to blow the lid on Big Crochet. It's a club that not many people go behind the curtain for. I believe that the first rule of Crochet Club is not to mention Crochet Club.
Was that your attempt at a joke? Come on. I mean, this joke's dead already. Come on, let's move on.
Yeah, I know. But I was threatened by a woman with a crochet needle.
I know. We learned that last segment. Tony inadvertently, surreptitiously, accidentally, with a wanton disregard for his own personal welfare.
My own safety, David. I did it for the show, I'll be honest with you. I did it for you. I did it for, as you like to call it, David, content.
What's the next date that you and your lady friend are going to go on?
Probably stamp collecting. I mean, I don't even know what happened. It was absolutely tragic, but we had a good time. And then after that, she bought me a milkshake from McDonald's. So everyone was a winner, David. Crochet was the winner.
Dude, I once was in San Diego with Miranda early on in our dating. She was living in San Diego. I was living in San Francisco. I flew down there to hang out. It was like 2015. We were kids.
Okay.
And she's like, let's grab McDonald's. And, you know, whatever. She wanted McNuggets. I wanted McNuggets. We were hungry. It was fast. It was easy. It was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just flown in. And I'm like, maybe some lovemaking's going to happen. So what do I bring?
Condoms.
Close. Well, yes, but I bring my dairy digestive supplements, Lactate.
Oh, do you know how much it turns me on when I hear about your lovemaking and your irritable bowel syndrome?
This is why if Miranda leaves me, I'm going to die alone, because I can't just eat white rice for a week before I go on a date. Like, I'm going to have a stomach ache. I have lost stranger sex, which I'm actually not such a fan of. But I one time went out with this woman. We had a great night. This like guy who's really old hit on her as I was on a date with her at a bar. We were both sitting at a bar, and we were just like kind of making fun of him. And like, you know, when two people like have energy and they're like in on a joke together, there was a bit of a spark. You know, I don't know that there was a ton of chemistry, but she lives my neighbor, and so she walks me home after the date because I'm on the way to her house, and. We're kind of waiting at my door, you know, in San Francisco, those like, you know,
the steps that go up.
Yeah, but the steel doors, like every building has steel doors because there's so much crime.
Oh, wow. Okay. Nice.
We're at my steel door and I open it and she's like, aren't you going to invite me up?
This is so, I didn't imagine you like this. Are you a first date plower?
Yeah, but I guess, I am, but I'm bad at sex.
Wow.
And I'm like, when you say plow, that implies some sort of prowess that I don't have.
Okay.
I should go to Bad Sex Anonymous. Hi, my name's David Cooper, and I'm bad at sex.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, she's like, "Aren't you going to invite me up?" I'm like, "Oh, I got a morning meeting, but I'd love to hang out again." And this, that, and the other. And so she walks. She's like, "Fine," and she walks home. I go home. I destroy the bathroom. I light a candle. I light a match, and I know she's just a block away. I've never been to her house, but she told me her address.
Okay.
And so I text her like 20 minutes later, like, oh, my morning meeting got canceled. Or like,
do you want to come back?
Do you want to come back? She never responds. That was the last I ever heard of her. Who knows what my life could have been if I didn't have IBS?
My God, IBS ruined your... We could not have done this show. You could not be with Miranda. That toilet could have survived without IBS, David. 3 lives, me, Miranda, the toilet, could have all been changed because of IBS.
But this is how you know it's love, and this is how you know Miranda may not ever leave me. I'm back in San Diego. We're back to the first story. We're back to the first level of misdirection. So she's like, I'm going to go to McDonald's. And I'm thinking, you know what? As a kid, I loved McDonald's milkshakes. She got one because they're good.
Wow.
And I thought, I can handle this. So I ate 4 Lactaid pills. You're only supposed to eat 1 or 2. I ate 4.
Yeah.
And I had the milkshake. And it wasn't enough. I was farting the whole night. And I'd maybe gone on like 20 dates with her. And she was like laughing, like we were giggling. I don't think we hooked up that night because I was so gassy. But we got along and we made a little joke about my gassiness. And I think that was the first night she really realized how bad it was.
Are they smelly?
They can be. I don't remember if that was a smelly night or just a... Seems like when you have more of them, they're less smelly. It's when you only have fewer of them, they have time to bake, you know?
I sometimes think of Miranda and wonder whether I should maybe launch some sort of charity for her or a GoFundMe.
You know, like Save the Children, Save the Whales, Save the Miranda.
Because the amount that she has to put up with you, just the pure fact that you have to take a tablet before any... it must happen here in the UK, but I've never heard it happen. And I do find it very... Like, you did it at Thanksgiving. You had a tablet. You had a plate of them. Like you were passing them around, which I found really hilarious.
Yeah, I took one. I think my brother took one. My friend Allegra, who's even more Jewish than me, took one, which is really funny because she's like covered in tattoos and is like an adult performer, but yet she's just she's like a Jewish granny trapped in like, I don't know, like a weird sideshow stripper's body. Yeah.
A clown, young sideshow Bob. Yeah.
Anyway, not important. Allegra, those listening, if they are listening, which they're not, don't know who that is. But that's the story. That's the McDonald's milkshake story. And that's back to the first level of misdirection. That's what you're going to do with your lady friend this weekend. Go for a McDonald's milkshake.
Absolutely, but I am still like, how long does it last? How long does this?
All right, back down to level 2. It could be an hour, it could be 48. It depends on what I've consumed. And I feel like if I'm eating real healthy, like getting lots of vegetables and healthy greens and chickpeas and all this, if I have that good stuff and then I have a bad meal like a milkshake, it doesn't get me as bad. I think my stomach is like, oh, the bacteria is in a good way because you haven't been eating garbage. If I eat garbage many days in a row, it accumulates like exponentially.
I'm sticking to this topic because I find it so fascinating. When you quite honestly say, when you destroy a toilet and it's like, like Chernobyl, you can't go back there for a number of years type thing. And maybe there's tourists that go there, like doomed tourist people. They go like to the Holocaust Museum, they go to Vietnam and they go to your toilet. How does Miranda cope? Because generally speaking, you live in quite a small apartment.
She just copes. I don't know. She kicks me out of the room sometimes. Sometimes I am gassy and she makes me go to the bathroom and I'm like, I don't have to go. And she's like, go to the toilet. She makes me sit there for an hour. That's one of the ways she copes. And
you should marry this woman. She's incredible.
I mean, if I wanted to get married again and she wanted to get married, we would get married. But for now, it's not happening.
For now, it's you, her, and the toilet.
I mean, look at you. You're what, 46, 47?
Yeah.
48?
But I've got good toilet happies. I'm fine.
49. But you've never even been married once.
No.
Wow, you talk me into this. It's a wild ride marriage. It changes things.
I'll tell you what. I come to Burning Man, you get married.
Fine.
Deal.
Do I have to marry Miranda or can I marry you?
Marry Miranda. I would never put up with your toilet habits. My God, man. I mean, I love you and I love to do this show. We'll do this show till we die, but no chance are we ever sharing a toilet, ever. Never going to happen.
Well, we'd have to be in a 2-bath household.
100%.
That could be one way to get you in the U.S. Get married.
How? Oh.
Yeah, I could get you a green card, but I wouldn't want to do it fraudulently. We'd have to consummate.
Yeah. Or maybe that would be the level of the show. Find me a wife to get me a green card. Is that legal?
Sort of. I mean, it's like, as long as it's not the primary reason for the marriage, like it's not fraud. But if you're just getting married for a green card and they find you out, they won't give you the green card. And technically it's illegal, although I think what they'll just do is not give you the green card and not let you be in the country. But it's technically, to be in a fraudulent marriage where the primary purpose is to get the person permanent residence and no other reason, that's illegal. Can't do that.
I mean, I just like the coloured card. I don't care what colour it is. Don't really care about staying in America. What other colours do they do?
They weren't green for a long time, and about 6 months before I got mine, like, you know, every few years the government updates like driver's permits and passports, and they're finally green again. So it is green.
What colour green? What kind of green?
It's like I don't know, it's like a licensee kind of like oscillating between like white digits and green digits, like kind of like a security green, if you know, kind of like on the back of a check, maybe, you know?
American Express green, that kind of green?
No, it's like a real government document shaded green type green.
So not forest green or lime green, not wild green, no?
No, more like grass green, you know, that maybe had a bit too much sun, could use a watering, but hasn't gone brown yet green.
But hasn't been peed on by a dog, that kind of green.
No, that'd be yellow green.
Okay, well, I'm glad that us and the listener have gone through that and now identified what colour green you've got in terms of your green card.
And back to the 0th layer of misdirection, we really did blow the lid on Big Croquet and Big Crochet. I can't see, it happens to me.
This is what I mean, David. This is what happened. This is what gets you, David. This is the second rule of Crochet Club. Don't ever mention Crochet Club.
Tony, I love you. Have a nice weekend. You're beautiful. You're handsome. And I don't know. That's all I got.
David, it's amazing. I never lie, except when I do.
You got the two twins at the fork, and one always lies, and the other one doesn't lie. And one way leads to gold, the other way leads to peril.
And one goes to heaven, isn't it? And then St. Peter's there at the gate.
Tony 5, our foreign correspondent. Up next, endangered bats have been ending up on online retail places. We're about to find out why that's happening, a little bit about the bats, and how we can prevent it. So if Nudnik retailers acting out on the internet is of interest to you, you're going to love this interview. We are here with another bat biologist. Step aside, Dan Riskin. We've got someone who co-authored a paper showing the painted woolly bat, a beautiful, colorful red and black bat that is endangered, is being sold online by people who I'm not such a fan of. I'm here with Dr. Joanna Coleman. She's an assistant professor of urban ecology at City University of New York, the Queens campus. Did I get that all right, Joanna?
Yes.
Okay, good. The bat. I imagine you're a fan of it. What can you tell me about the painted woolly bat?
Okay, so it lives in South and Southeast Asia in 11 countries, and not really that much is known about the bat in terms of its populations. It's a bit hard to study, but it does have sort of a looks or appearance that I guess is both a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's a blessing in the sense that, you know, it's a very spectacular looking bat because it's bright orange on the body, and then the wings are, you know, black with orange patterning. However, I guess these looks make it quite desirable by people who collect taxidermied bats. And so, you know, it's appealing to these people, and therefore it's being sold in large numbers on various shopping websites.
I got to admit, I'm looking at some examples of what's being sold. There are these little glass cases with this cool bat in it, and even some of these ads that are listing them for sale on Amazon, eBay, Etsy, they say that the bat is sustainably harvested, which you know a little bit more about this than I do. Is that something that is going on? Is that something, so I shouldn't worry about these bats ending up online?
No sustainable harvest of bats for the so-called ornamental trade, which is when we are, you know, selling wildlife as ornaments. Definitely not a thing. There is no sustainable harvesting of these bats. So they are not being bred in captivity. So there's no bat farms for commercial purposes. And another claim that comes up sometimes is that the bats died a natural death, and then, you know, they were just found like that. The thing is that a bat carcass in the environment is going to decompose relatively quickly. And not only that, there's not going to be these huge numbers of naturally killed carcasses for collectors to harvest, at least not enough to supply a trade like this.
So where are they coming from? How are they being harvested?
Right. So to be clear, we studied what was going on Amazon, eBay, and Etsy in terms of sales that were, or listings that were targeting consumers based in the United States, right? So we don't really know what's happening on the sort of supply side for sure. But it's most likely that people are going out in the habitats where these bats live, and they are just removing them. And we are concerned that they're removing basically all the individuals that they encounter.
So going in there with like a big old net and removing these endangered bats at an alarming rate, could that be something that's happening?
That's a great question. So these bats, they tend to live in kind of habitats that are what we call scrubby. So not really forests, but more like, small shrubs and sparse trees, I guess. But they also live in agricultural areas, specifically banana plantations, and they love to spend their time when they're resting, which is what we call roosting. So they roost in the sort of dried leaves of banana plants, and they don't roost very high above the ground, like maybe only, between 1.5 to 3 meters. So actually, the collectors could just be going out, and whenever they encounter one of these bats, and perhaps it's plantation workers, they might just be plucking them right out of these leaves and then, selling them for however much they're selling them for.
It's just like, okay, I'm harvesting bananas. Hey, quick score. There's a bat I can sell. They grab it. What responsibility do you think Etsy, Amazon, eBay has to avoid endangered species being collected and sold on their marketplaces? Like, should they allow this kind of stuff?
So actually, this particular species is not endangered. It is currently classified at a level called near threatened, which is basically one step below the level of vulnerable, and that is a threatened category. It means that if whatever conditions there are in nature that are causing this bat's populations to decline, and they are declining, if those conditions are not fixed, well, then the species could become threatened. Now, if you're asking me what the moral responsibility is of Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, that's a difficult question to ask because morals are so subjective. And what I think is morally justified might not be what you think is morally justified. But certainly I wish they would not sell these. That's for sure.
What a diplomatic answer. I mean, you are a bat biologist. The obvious answer would be like, they shouldn't be allowed. But you answered that so diplomatically. I love it. But certain animals and certain endangered species, you can't, peddle in their carcasses. There's warehouses of customs facilities with like weird endangered animals that they seized at the border. I once saw one, and I'm trying to remember where, but that's a conversation for another time. But I guess what I'm saying is there's existing regulations protecting some species. Could that possibly be expanded to include these kinds of bats and these kind of not quite endangered, but one step below species?
Definitely. And in fact, what's going on here, it's already illegal. So there is a law in the United States, which is called the Lacey Act. It was passed in 1900, and it makes it illegal to bring into the United States any species that was harvested illegally in its, source country. So wherever the bats live. Now, this particular species, painted woolly bats, live in 11 countries, and in nearly all of them, it's illegal to be hunting them, to be commercializing them, so selling them, and or to be exporting them. So that in and of itself already makes this legally problematic. So of course, I don't think that any illegal trade should be allowed on any e-commerce platform. But the Lacey Act is not always strictly enforced. And so better protection would be achieved if we could list this species on the one treaty that deals with transboundary or international trade in wildlife. And that is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, or CITES. And currently this bat is not listed on that treaty. So yeah.
On the flip side of it, do you think consumer awareness could help? Like letting, people probably think they're just buying something cool to put up on their wall, and they don't realize the kinds of impact what they're doing has, especially when the listing is just sort of egregiously containing language that this is sustainable. Obviously, that's a lie, but, I could imagine myself, not that I collect these things, but I could imagine myself making this mistake without knowing had I not have been educated. So is there a kind of consumer awareness component that you could speak to or that you'd like to see done?
Totally. I mean, what you're saying really resonates because we did not actually study this in detail, but we've looked through the comments that buyers post on the listings after they've purchased something. And to us, the comments suggest that, just as you're saying, a lot of people don't realize the impact this is having. For example, several people say things like, "I love bats." Now, if people love bats and they don't realize that by buying these taxidermied bats, they could be contributing to the decline of the species in the wild, well, then you would think that by raising their awareness of the impacts of this or the potential impacts of this activity, that might help, dry up the demand. And actually what we're doing now is we're looking at kind of a multi-pronged attack on the entire ornamental bat trade. So, to try and address both the demand side and also the supply side. And that way, hopefully we can just shut it down.
All right. Well, if people see pictures of the painted woolly bat, framed in glass, or they see it online as something they might want to buy for their loved ones, think again. Don't do it. Is that a good piece of advice?
That would be my piece of advice for sure. Yeah, especially not if you're someone who loves bats or loves wildlife, or even someone who just cares about the fact that, well, species just have the right to exist, and it has nothing to do with what those species do that it is beneficial to us. I mean, they're species just like we are, and I guess you might say that it's not really up to us to decide that they don't, that they're worth more hanging on our walls than living in their habitats.
The California Academy of Sciences. That's where I went. That's where there were exotic, endangered animal taxidermy specimens that U.S. Customs gave scientists to study. I don't know why I had to shout that out. That's what I was talking about earlier. Wow, what a terrible way to end an interview. Thanks for talking to me about the painted woolly bat. If anyone sees it online, they should be shaking their head and definitely not purchasing it. I appreciate your time, though, Joanna.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me and helping to raise awareness of this really important issue, at least to us, and hopefully to your listeners.
And no thanks to Dan Riskin, who's also a bat biologist, who seemingly is not concerned with the painted woolly bat. He did not mention it in his interview today.
Well, I expect that Dan is, he's got other things that he's thinking about, but I think he's quite concerned because we've talked about it. So, yeah.
He is. It was on his list of stories, and that's why we reached out to you.
Oh, good.
All right, Joanna, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Joanna Coleman is an assistant professor of urban ecology at City University of New York, the Queens campus. Up next, remarkable resurfaced videos show chimpanzees capable of human speech. There's even a paper about it, and we're going to talk to one of the authors of that paper in a moment. Chimpanzees! You're going to love it. Chimpanzee utterances refute purported missing links for novel vocalizations and syllabic speech. I have no idea what that means, but it's the title of a recently published study that sheds new light on the neural and cognitive capabilities of our close cousins in the animal kingdom, chimpanzees. There are groundbreaking findings on their ability to mimic human speech. I'm here with someone who worked on that study. His name is Axel Ekström. Axel, thanks for talking to me today about chimpanzees.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about the paper. Tell me about your research. I've long thought that chimpanzees, they're pretty smart, but they can't necessarily speak. They can't necessarily understand our vocabulary and language.
Yeah. Well, I'll start out by saying that I'm very careful to not say that they mimicked anything, because frankly, that's just part of the evidence that we don't have. And I'll start by saying that in primatology, you get people who are very liberal and we'll never let you get away with saying that there's anything that apes can't do. And then you get people who are really conservative who are just saying apes can't do anything. That's the reason they're interesting, is, they're just showing us all the stuff that we do so much better.
Well, I couldn't understand your paper because I'm not that
Right.
smart. So I read the media summaries, and of course you get some reporter who says mimic.
Yes, and I'm sure they do, and I'm sure many people will take it as that, because we talk quite a lot about vocal learning, which is explicitly the ability to repeat something that you've heard, right? And so that is mimicking. But explicitly, what we do show is there were at least 2 cases. We're actually aware of a third one that didn't really make it into the study, but there are at least 2 cases of chimps that have learned to say a 2 disyllabic, right? So 2 syllables utterances that corresponds very closely to something like mama or wa. At least one of them has this sort of incomplete mouth closure, so you get this sort of "la" rather than a "ma." But the thing that makes that interesting is there has been a rather explicit hypothesis for many years. One, that chimps just can't learn new vocalizations in general, and if there's, to our knowledge, there's not a single occurrence of a chimp in the wild saying "mama." So that probably is generally true. They tend not to do it, but it doesn't seem to be that it's just downright impossible, black and white. The second one is that there has been an explicit hypothesis that in humans, when you look at the motor cortex in humans, you find that there is this kind of overlap between the areas that represent the jaw and the areas that represent the voice box. And so the idea was that, well, maybe this overlap is necessary for syllables, because if you think about speaking, you kind of do this like, wow, wow. That's kind of the general organization, the general speech pattern.
Moving your jaw would be kind of like a motor sort of thing, and then vocalization would be a vocal cord thing?
Yes. Well, we call it phonation, technically, which is what you do with the vocal cords. Because, of course, not all speech is necessarily phonated, right? You can whisper, and you can certain sounds like that like
plosive, we call it in radio.
Yeah, exactly. But the idea was that maybe chimps don't have that overlap. Maybe that's why they can't do this. Maybe that's something that's a necessary foundation of speaking, and it may well be. But if there are cases of chimpanzees who produce what is, for all intents and purposes, syllabic utterances, then either that overlap may not be as crucial, or just the one thing that makes that possible, or chimpanzees may even have that overlap. That's usually how I've come to summarize it.
So tell me about these 2 chimps that have been recorded or that you've studied that made these vocalizations. I believe their names are Renata and Johnny.
Yeah. So there's, I think people are probably kind of aware and somewhere in the kind of backwater of their consciousness that people used to do these language experiments on primates. Like, people aren't really surprised by that. They probably heard it somewhere, but it's not something we do anymore. And part of the reason is because those studies didn't end very well. They weren't very ethical by modern standards. Today, there's also, I mean, in the European Union, where most of the authors of this papers are working, there's even explicit regulations that you're not allowed to do any experimentation on apes.
They're our cousins. I mean, our DNA is, 99% shared with them? It makes sense that we wouldn't want to torture them.
Sure. Most experiments aren't downright torture.
Fair enough.
You're actually not allowed to basically do anything unless it's medically motivated. Like, you can do brain scans of a gorilla, for instance, which I know happened last year because they thought he had a brain tumor. But so that's allowed, but you can't really do experiments very easily at all. So that's part of the reason why all of that kind of shrunk away. So the reason that we studied these 2 chimps, that's all kind of just background for why the study looks the way it does, is we managed to sort of acquire footage of chimps that had been recorded for completely different reasons. Now, Johnny lived in a primate sanctuary, I think it's in California, and was recorded on what is essentially a home video. It was what I believe is a caretaker who recorded him. He was apparently, we've spoken to some of the people who are in charge of the sanctuary, and they have sort of affirmed to us that this is something he did, and he did this quite regularly. Is that he I think I have a quote in the paper, which is that Johnny would apparently say "mama" to anything because he knew that people liked it, and it would get him stuff that he wanted.
So not necessarily an understanding of the concept of the mother associating it with the vocalization.
No. And that's another thing that people usually will ask, like, do they know what that means? And I have to say, well, like, it sure doesn't look like it. It looks sort of manipulative in that sense.
That's Johnny. I want to talk about the findings now. So you published this paper. The central thesis of the paper, or the thing you sought to prove, was what?
Well, I was most interested in saying, like, look, chimps have been claimed to have this substantial problem with producing speech. And here we have at least two chimps who produces what, if you look at, so we have a measurement, an illustration of acoustic energy called a spectrogram, which I'm sure you're familiar with if you work in sound. And when you look at the spectrograms of these utterances, of the chimpanzee utterances, they look like what you would expect. Like it's a very strange study in a sense, because if you talk to someone who studies speech and you say, look, these chimps say mama and it looks like mama, they go, so what? Because of course it does, because that's what it would look like if a chimp said that. But the interesting thing is that they said it at all, and that it looks human, essentially. And that's, of course, the second half of the study is we presented it to people who were naive to the recordings. They didn't know where the recording came from. And they identified the syllables and essentially similarly to the way we did when we analyzed them, which is that a kind of majority seem to agree that there is something very ma-like about what Renata says, and something a little more kind of reduced, like blah blah, kind of about what Johnny says, because he's a little, for lack of a better word, a little less articulate with his utterance.
So you published these findings. You sort of verify that they are similar utterances to human words. Does the scientific community enjoy your paper? Is there skepticism? Like you referenced earlier, there was two camps of people who view chimpanzee behavior.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a strange situation, because this is one of those, this is I think in some sense kind of a holy grail for the liberal side. I'm not very much on the liberal side.
Well, I mean, that's great science, right? Like, you don't have an opinion, you publish a paper, you have a hypothesis, and if one side picks it up, even if it's not your side, it doesn't really matter, because you're just kind of doing the science.
Well, it puts me in a rather strange situation, because this is not actually what I'm generally interested in. Like, I build models of the vocal tract for primates and things like that. And so this was just kind of a fun thing that came about. Because this whole imitation and what is true imitation, like, to me, it gets really, really subjective, and you have to really squint at the findings to make sense of it. So I'm sure some people are saying that this is evidence of vocal learning in chimpanzees, which I think you have to be careful with that, because vocal learning proper means that they've heard something and they've explicitly tried to imitate it. I think you can make a case for that for Johnny, because there's the context of his utterance is someone says mama to him and then he says it back. So there's some kind of prompting there with the cue being similar. With the other one, we just have no context at all for how she learned it. So you really have to take another look at it. I'm sure that generally findings tend not to convince people who don't want to be convinced. And there's plenty of people who don't want to be convinced of that chimps can learn what is, for all intents and purposes, speech-like sounds. But overall, I mean, I think those sounds kind of speak for themselves. I think they look like what speech would look like if a chimpanzee spoke. It's the closest thing I can.
Is this a window into how our ancestors may have developed speech?
You're kind of staring down the barrel of a 6 million year long black box, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea generally when you study vocal behavior in great apes and so on. That's always kind of part of what you like talking about. this tells us something. But like ultimately, I mean, how would you know? How would you prove it?
And chimpanzees have had the benefit of 6 million years of evolution too, so it's not like we can look at them and say they're a snapshot in time.
Exactly. The thing that I guess to me it seems to sell is that a lot of these models, because of this, I'll call it a bias, but it's generally not difficult to understand why there is a bias given just the low quality of evidence from primates. But the bias against primates have kind of led to a lot of these language development models being based on birds instead, bird song.
Huh.
The idea being that birds do sort of similar things to us, like we take in, or singing birds do at least. And I mean, I think, like, I don't like to make more of my data than I'm not a good spinner. I guess is what I'll go with. But I will say that I think this kind of the overlap hypothesis, this idea that you need this to produce syllabic utterances, I think that to me motivates a second look at least. I think we make the point in the paper that like we do have something to gain from studying the actual behavior of great apes that we won't get otherwise. So I mean, my whole shtick has been that I think these models should be complex. I think they should be able to take account of a lot of factors. So to me, the fact that chimps can probably do a little bit more than we thought kind of sits very well with me. I think it adds to a very, very complex puzzle that people are very keen on reducing to very simple things.
Axel, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's interesting stuff and sharing your findings with me.
Cool. Yeah, you're welcome.
Axel Ekström, did I get it right?
Ekström, yeah.
Ekström is a doctoral student with the Division of Speech, Music and Hearing at the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. Coming up next, facts you didn't know about sports and science by somebody who just wrote a book on that topic. It's the Olympics, and there's some interesting stuff that goes on in sports. It's all to do with the human body, I think. But I don't have to know because the person coming next does. And it's going to be a good conversation. We are here to discuss some interesting facts, factoids about sports and science, and we are here with a mathematician and author. Her book, Be a Champion, 40 Facts You Didn't Know About Sports and Science, available wherever books are sold. Her name is Amandine Aftalion. Amandine, thanks for talking to me today.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
So you got this book about interesting sports facts. What possesses you to decide to investigate this stuff and write this book?
Well, the thing is, I'm a mathematician, so I have tools, and especially minimizing energy. And at some point in my life, I decided it would be interesting to minimize human energy. And this is how I started modeling sports performance, because in sports, it's very important to save energy and effort. And then after a few interviews with journalists, I decided it would be good to tell the story myself. And with the help of an illustrator, this is how the book came out.
So you're applying mathematical models to sort of athletes' energy expenditure? Is that what you were investigating?
This is it. That is, when an athlete is going to run 100 meter, 200, 400, 1500, just decide how he should run, how he should spend his effort, his energy to perform the best possible way. And this is what I put into equation: the mechanics, the energy, the effort, and motivation.
It sounds like a simple question to start out to try to answer, but I know once you attempt to answer a question like that, it very quickly gets very complicated, does it not?
Well, the equation behind, if you want to understand all the symbols, then it may become a little bit complicated, but explaining it with words is not such complicated.
Hence the book. Okay, so what are some of the things that you wanted to translate from, complicated mathematical symbols to an accessible book where people could learn about sports and sports science?
Well, the book is made up of questions. So the question I like best is, why do sprinters slow down when crossing the finish line? Did you know about that?
Well, isn't that just a natural thing to do? Like sleep because you're done? Or is there something more interesting?
No, okay, so I should state it differently. They slow down actually long before crossing the finish line. That is, if you take even Usain Bolt in a 100 meter, he speeds up to 70 meters, but the last 30 meters, he's just slowing down all the way.
I have no idea. My guess would be there's something about the human body that's the most optimized way to do it.
That's it, of course. This is the best way to do, because if Usain Bolt does it this way, it means that's the best thing to do. But the thing is that if you try running a sprint, speeding up all the way, then we can show mathematically that it's not as good. That really the best strategy is to start as fast as you can. And because human beings are not supermen, they cannot run as fast as they can for 100 meters. So they end up speeding up until 60, 70 meters, and then they cannot maintain their propulsive force and end up slowing down. So the point is, for sprinters, is to slow down the least. So the ones who win are the ones who slow down least.
Cool. Another question you looked into in your book was why, when you're riding a bike, the faster you go, the more stable you go. I myself don't tell my mother, although she knows, it breaks her heart. I own a motorcycle, and slow speed maneuvering and fast speed maneuvering are so wildly different. I imagine something is sort of true for bicycles as well. But I guess the question is, why?
Well, this comes from centrifugal force. Balancing your bike depends a lot on the handlebars. It turns out that if you turn the handlebars, you increase the area where you can be stable. Because if your handlebars are totally straight, then it's very difficult to keep your balance. If you turn the handlebars, you realize that even you could be standing on your bicycle. It's not that difficult. So you increase the balance because you increase the points that are in contact with the ground. And so you increase the area where your center of gravity, which is more or less your center of the body, can be. When you start riding your bike and you start speeding up, there is something that is going on, is that your weight might make that you lose your balance, and then you have to find something to find your balance again. And after a slight imbalance, the only thing to do is turn the handlebars. And because of the centrifugal force, there's a little formula which is in the book, which is not that complicated, which shows that more or less it's a ratio of your velocity divided by the radius of your trajectory that is going to produce the balance. So if you have a high velocity, you have to have a large radius. And if you have a large radius, means that you are almost straight. But if you have a small velocity, to keep the ratio of the same size, if the ratio is v over the radius, a small velocity, you have a small radius. And if the radius is small, it means that you have to give to turn on a small circle, so to give a very big push on your handlebars. And a big push of your handlebars at low velocity is really not what you want to do.
Are there any sports-based facts that you uncovered or that you delivered in your book that would surprise the average athlete, that's very sort of counterintuitive? You know, traditional thinking is that you do sports in one manner, but in reality, things are a little bit different when you look under the surface?
I don't think so, because the point of this book is really to explain what champions do. And what happens is that sometimes champions find things that we're not expecting before. That's the case, for instance, when Dick Fosbury invented the way to jump, or when Bob Beamon changed the way to jump, or in these Olympics, how Léon Marchand is changing the way to undulate. But in this book, I explain things that exist. So I don't think, I just try to explain why it's like that.
Could I use any of the findings or any of the things that I read in your book to help me become a better sort of amateur athlete, to take the learnings of professional and apply them to me?
My specialty is running. This is what I've studied really hard for 10 years. So this is where I could give you the best advice. And there are several ones. So the first one maybe is don't go running alone. Because it has been shown that if you run a lap that is on a standard track, which is 400 meters, you go running, for a good runner, he will be 1 second quicker if he goes running behind someone instead of running alone.
Is that drafting? Does that have to do with the air pressure? No, okay.
Nothing to do. Nothing. It's not like cycling. So if you go cycling, then it's better to be behind because there's the wind in front of you, and it's better to be behind because you have less drag, that is less air resistance, that is slowing you down. Oh, by the way, if someone goes cycling, it's better also to have someone behind, because if someone is behind you, then the vortices that are formed behind you don't have the room to be there because there is someone. So the drag will be reduced by 3%, more or less.
Oh, so it's good to be in the middle of the pack if you're cycling. But let's talk running. Why is it good to run?
So running has nothing to do with air, because runners don't run fast enough to have anything to do with air resistance. So the idea is psychological. That is, if you go running behind someone who is giving you the pace, you don't have to think about what you're doing. And what happens is that your brain doesn't need to think, and you're not a robot. So it's very important in the effort, all the information that is coming from the brain to the muscle. And if this information is easier because you're just following someone and you don't have to think about your pace, then your effort is not so important. And in the end, you have bigger energy to spend on running a little bit more.
Cool. And a couple of the other facts about running and being a better runner?
Well, so this is in general for any race. And that's why, for people, when you are in a lane starting a race at the Olympics, it's always better to be in an inside lane than an outside lane, because you see the others and it helps you speeding up at the beginning. So something else about running, there's something about endurance that I have studied a lot, that you should start fast, but not too fast. You should start fast because this is starting your aerobic energy, that is all the system coming from oxygen. And so the best way to run an endurance race, that is starting from 1500 to 10,000 marathon, etc., is to start not too slowly so that your oxygen system starts as quickly as possible. And then to keep energy for the end for speeding up. So, of course, the length where you speed up in an endurance race depends on the duration of the race. But for Olympic athletes, we have made a lot of studies on exactly, how you should speed up, or what is the best strategic way to exhaust your opponents.
Well, thanks for sharing all these things with me. Your book seems like it's a fascinating read. Thanks for coming here and talking about it.
Thank you.
The book is called Be a Champion, 40 Facts You Didn't Know About Sports and Science, and I am here with Amandine Aftalion. She is a mathematician and an author. That's the show. Thank you for listening to it. And on Friday, we sing. That's another week of This Is Going Well, I think, with David Cooper. Thanks for listening to all the stuff that I put out for you to listen to. I really appreciate that you tuned in to this show. I really appreciate it. I already said that. I hope you have a nice weekend and you see some of your family members if you're not estranged from them, because you should see your family or not. I don't care. I hope you will listen next week. If you don't, I won't do anything, because I'm not the boss of you. I'm not the boss of you, so do whatever you want. This Is Going Well, I think, is the name of the show. I should have probably stopped singing minutes ago, but here we are. I'm gonna continue for the rest of this 2-minute track. Regrets, I have many of them right now, but I don't know if I can stop singing yet. Okay, I can now.